Deadly Force is a season 1 episode of Gargoyles that aired in 1994 on the Disney Afternoon block alongside Darkwing Duck and Tailspin, and that has been subsequently pulled from syndication. The target demographic was children, and that gap between who the industry thought was watching and what the show thought they could handle is exactly what this episode exposes. Broadway is the large, good natured gargoyle who eats everything and worries about nothing. He spends an afternoon watching westerns, old ones, the kind where the hero draws smooth and fast, and the bad guy falls clean, and the gun is just an extension of the hero's righteousness. Broadway was enchanted by this, and one night he slips into Eliza's apartment through the roof. She has hung her service weapon by the door when she came home, right there, accessible, the way cops do when they're off duty and not thinking about it. Broadway picks it up. As he is recreating the scenes he saw in the movie, it goes off. Elisa hits the kitchen floor. She doesn't say anything meaningful. There's no swelling score, no last words delivered through gritted teeth, no moment of heroic clarity. She just falls. And the blood spreads across the linoleum with the indifference of physics. The camera is not interested in Broadway's reaction. It lingers on Elisa. We know exactly what the shot was doing because when Toon Disney lifted its ban on the episode in 2002, the first thing the network did was cut it. The wide shot of Elisa lying in the puddle of her own blood was gone, replaced with a close up of her face. They understood exactly what the image was doing. They just didn't want it done. This was a kids' show. In the same decade, the A Team was still in syndication, a show where vehicles exploded weekly and the body count was somehow zero, where violence was a firework display attached to a punchline. That was acceptable. That was fine for both children and adults. No one pulled at that. But Gargoyles had Eliza Maza in critical condition, and some affiliate programmers looked at that and decided it was too much. What they meant, if you read between the lines, was that it was too authentic. It refused the deal that Action Entertainment had made with the audience, that guns were props, that injury is temporary, that dramatic function of violence is part of the excitement rather than the consequence. Deadly Force tore up that deal and handed the pieces back. Broadway spends the rest of the episode in guilt that the show does not resolve for him. He doesn't atone cleanly. He doesn't save the day. He tracks down a man named Draken, the mobster who's been flooding the streets with illegal weapons, the ostensible plot of the episode, but he does it with shaking hands and grief behind his eyes. And when it's over, the grief is still there. The episode doesn't tell you that Broadway is okay because he isn't. Obviously, he shot his friend. Compare that to the average episode of The Punisher, a Marvel Netflix show built entirely around gun violence, aimed squarely at adults, where Frank Castle shoots approximately 40 people per episode, and the camera treats each one as a choreography problem. The violence is gorgeous, slow motion, and backlit. The craft of the shooting is what the show is inviting you to admire, and you never once have to sit with what a bullet does to a body at rest in a quiet apartment. The Punisher is obviously not a show about gun violence. It's a show about gun aesthetics, and there's a huge difference. Deadly Force understood the difference in 1994. A lot of television still does not. Now, this is the part where someone objects that the comparison is unfair. Gargoyles isn't trying to do what The Punisher does. Different genres, different goals, and that's absolutely true. And it's also the point. Deadly Force wasn't trying to be a serious exploration of gun violence as a social issue. It was trying to tell a story about consequence, about a character making a mistake and having to live inside it. The gun violence was the vehicle for character study, not the subject matter itself. And in service of that goal, the writers were unflinching because the story required it. Violence in adult drama tends to go one of two ways. It's aestheticized, made beautiful, made cool, made into the show's signature visual language, or it's deployed as suffering for suffering's sake, consequence without meaning. The middle ground, consequence in service of character, violence as something a person has to carry, That is the narrow lane. And Gargoyles walked it in 22 minutes with children, with a gargoyle who liked westerns. Now, here is what the syndication pool tells us. When Disney's affiliates shelved this episode, they weren't responding to the content being harmful, they were responding to it being uncomfortable. They had a theory about what animation was for. Animation was a safe space. Animation is where children go to not be disturbed. The gargoyles can fight, the villain can scheme, but the consequences have to stay manageable, or we've broken the contract with the parents who parked their kids in front of us. Greg Weisman and his writing staff disagreed. They thought that the contract with the audience, including the children, was more important than the contract with the market. And they made something that actually worked, that had genuine emotional impact, that people still remember 30 years later, specifically because it didn't look away. Not that animation is better than live action, that it's a medium with the same range of possibility and the same capacity for craft and cowardice, the same potential to take the easy road or the honest one. The easiest road in animation is to use the medium's perceived innocence as permission to never mean anything. The harder road is what Deadly Force did, use the medium's perceived safety as cover to tell the truth.